You're probably thinking, ooh, this sounds really cool, but how do I use this in my intensive English program? So, to talk a little bit about how we use it, one thing that we like about it is you can monitor how much time students have used practicing. So you can take a look at how much time in general they've used just on the program, but you can also go through and see how much time that they've spent on individual lessons. So if they say, hey, I practiced this one and it was really easy and whatever, and then you go and you see they only spent 2 minutes on it, maybe they need to go back and do it again. So you can also, aside from looking at how much time they've spent, you can see their performance by percentage. So I don't know if you noticed on, let's see if I can go back here, on the, where was I? On this one, you'll see that there are some stars on each lesson. They each represent 25%. So if you only have 1 star on there, you probably didn't do a great job on that lesson. If you have all 4, yay, good job. So you can go through and see exactly what percentage your students got on that particular lesson. And if you choose to, you can set a threshold for what it means to pass any particular lesson. So I think the default is like 70 or 75% for what is considered passing. But if you want to set it lower or higher, you can do that if you want to. As a teacher, in each class that you've set up, you also have the choice of going through and listening to your students' recordings, which can be beneficial to figure out if it's actually your student doing the recording. We had a gentleman, I think last year, whose girlfriend was doing all the recordings for him, so he didn't get a lot of points for that assignment. And then you can also go through and check out when the last time was that your students logged in. So if they say, oh yeah, I practiced this week and everything was really easy, and you go in and you see they haven't been on it in 2 weeks, then they're full of baloney. Okay. Another cool thing about it is you can visually see how students have increased or decreased in their skill for that sound. So if you look up here at the top at the key, the blue color is for the diagnostic that students did at the very beginning of the session. So that was just kind of the baseline, what they can do, what they can't do. The green color is, so this is one of my current students I have right now. The green is basically where she was like last week. So this first line is just a sample of some of the sounds that she's been working on. So you'll see she does have some where she has gotten better and some where she's gotten a little bit worse. So if you take a look, like this one for example, you can see that she's increased quite a bit, and this one that she's increased quite a bit. Because those are 2 lessons where we did specific in-class practice, and then she went and got back online and did some more practice with this. Some of these are some that we haven't specifically worked on in class. And the thing is, when students are doing their practice, it's recording everything they say for that whole word or the whole phrase. So it's not just the target sound that's being recorded, it's recording other parts of the words too. So if one of these sounds was in part of the recordings, maybe they're just focusing really hard on that target sound, and so they're not trying so hard on some of the other sounds. So their skill level can decrease a little bit. And let's see. Okay, so like I said, in our program we do have 2 different tracks. We have our undergrad track and our graduate track, and we use NativeAccent a little bit differently in each one. So I want to talk a little bit about what the teacher role is for each one and what the student role is for each one. So for our undergrads, we do have 9 levels in our undergraduate program. So we're using NativeAccent for levels 3 through 9. Levels 1 and 2 are really basic if students come in and don't know a whole lot, so the vocabulary can be a little bit challenging for them. So we're just doing 3 through 9. So for undergrad, we're basically just looking at how much time they're practicing. We're not so much we're not grading them on improvement, we're grading them on how much time they've completed. Because basically if students are practicing, they're improving. Nobody's spending a bunch of time on this program and not improving. And then we also go through and listen to recordings so we can figure out if there's some things that we might want to talk about in class, or if we want to pull students aside and say, hey, I noticed you had some trouble with this particular sound. Do you want to talk to me about it? So for the students, we ask them to complete somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes of practice per week. So that adds up to about 3 or 5 lessons. So each lesson is maybe 10 or 15 minutes long, depending on how much time each student is dedicating to that lesson. Our sessions, we have 2 8-week sessions per semester. So if you're taking into account the first week and then the last week, you know, kind of initial assessments and finals and that sort of thing, students get about 5 or 6 weeks of practice per 8-week session. So while they are focusing on their native accent lessons, they're also doing they're doing weekly reflection pieces to kind of think about what they've done well, what they need to improve on, how in general did the lessons from that week improve their pronunciation. And then on that reflection, they can also ask questions for the teacher. Hey, I'm having trouble with my V's and my W's. Can we talk about this? Or, hey, everything I practiced this week was awesome. I feel really good about it. At the end of the session, we also do a final self-evaluation. So students think about, okay, during the session, these were the sounds that were easy for me, and these were the sounds that were difficult for me. Here's what I want to work on in the future. Here's when I think I might use this, that sort of thing. Okay, so for the graduate students, it's a little bit different. We do all of the same things that we do with the undergrads, but there's a little bit extra to it. So in our undergrad program, we're using native accent as part of our communication skills class, but for our graduate students, it's been made the basis of our accent reduction class. So we do have an accent reduction class with the undergrads, but it's a totally different setup. So again, we're basing it on completion and not so much improvement. But what we're doing differently with the graduates is we're assigning specific lessons for students to work on. And I'll show you an example of that here in a second. Okay, so with students in the graduate program, we're doing like in-class specific pronunciation practice, and then students have a chance to then, after that, get onto native accent and work on those specific sounds, and then if they want to do some practice on other sounds and things afterwards, they can do that too. So that would be the self-study after they complete the lessons that their teacher has assigned them. They're also doing the weekly reflection of what was hard, what was easy, what do I need to still work on, and then they have their final self-evaluation at the end. Here's how I feel about my pronunciation now, more or less confident, hopefully more if they've been coming to class and doing the work. So, for example, so again, this is from my graduate class that I'm teaching this session. So from the diagnostic that students did at the beginning of the session, I can go through and see which sounds they in general had the most trouble with and which sounds weren't so difficult for them. So, and I guess I should mention, native accent isn't only, it's mostly pronunciation, but there are a few grammar points in there they can work on. They can also work on some word stress and fluency if they want to. So if you look up here in this drop down, if I want to choose particular lessons for students to work on, I can choose pronunciation from there, or word stress, or grammar, or whatever I want to do. For my class specifically, we were just working on pronunciation. So I went through and chose pronunciation, and then I can go under performance and organize it by what's been the most difficult for them to what's not so hard. So, for example, most of my graduate students, their L1 is Telugu. So, for example, an issue that they had, or some sounds they had issues with, were like V's and W's, for example. So we spent one of our 50-minute classes working on like minimal pairs and using words in short stories, talking specifically in class and using mirrors so they can see what their mouth is supposed to do. And then I go through and I take my W and my V and I pull it over and put it into their specific lesson plan. And then they have to complete those 2 lessons before they can go on and do any other lessons from native accent. So what I did is I used the diagnostic from the beginning, and I also used, when Karen was talking at the beginning, it had that list of some of the specific sounds that are difficult for students. I went through and looked at that and saw how many people are having trouble with that specific sound, and kind of organized my lesson plan for the session around that. So each day we would work on something different. One day was like L's, and another day was V's and W's. Another day was ch and j. So, and the thing was, it was a lot of fun. Students really loved working on stuff in class and pairing up with each other, having the mirrors to work on stuff, and then being able to work on it by themselves, go home and do stuff, and kind of figure things out on their own.